Hey,
Hey, Glenn.
what's happening?
As far as what?
You got a storm going on there?
I was getting some notification about a storm, but there's no storm I see.
Yeah. It
going
just
on
started raining here.
Yeah, Dana was telling me he saw that
Yeah.
on his phone. So, it's been a while. How long has it been? A couple months?
Yeah. I've got a problem with one foot.
What?
A blister appeared that seems to have turned into an ulcer that could, in fact, be cancer.
What? Oh, my goodness.
In my foot, right behind the small toe on the right foot. So I'm hobbling around with a cane these days, and I met with the cell yesterday. I have a basic problem is I've been to a foot nurse in town here, and she recommended that I see another person who's got a doctor's degree on feet. Then I got called in by the cell who said, the OPP has not begun an investigation into the magnetic fields on your property, which they should have done months ago, if not years ago, when Tom was killed. So they said, if you go to the doctor and they do something to your foot before an investigation by the police takes place, and they take pictures of my hernia and my foot and the chapped lips and burning hip and whatever, unless they do that before I go to the doctor, then they'll blame it all on the doctor. And that's not what needs to happen. There are millions of people in line for genocide here, and we're not going to be self-serving to fix a problem on one person and then have millions of people die. So you gotta use the opportunity. And by using the opportunity, it means you may lose a foot or worse. But is that worse than millions of people dying? We don't think so. What do you think they said?
Me? If you balance it out, it's not worse. Losing a foot is not worse than millions of people dying.
Yeah. So I told them, well, I'm going to write a letter to the doctor and hand deliver it to make sure they can't claim they didn't see it by getting into a taxi so that there's a witness to by delivering the letter. And I went to the library yesterday afternoon because I can't basically write here. There's no place here. It's cold and dark. So I took a taxi, went to town, went to the library 10 o'clock in the morning, and I look at the door and it says Wednesday hours, 1 o'clock. So I had to go back to a meeting with the cell, and they dictated basically what I was to say. Is Danny on here too?
He should be coming in a little bit. He's not on at the moment.
Okay. I'll get the letter. I made a copy that I gave them. The cell said that this is what is required for them. So the letter is addressed to Melanie Atkinson, and it completes a patient intake form on the first page, which basically asks things: your name, your address, your phone numbers, you're married, your email, your who referred you to them. Are there any other medical conditions that we should be aware of? Cancer is one of them, maybe, I put beside it. Hernia, foot blister, ulcer, question mark. And then list any sports activities, interests, work on bush and farm work. So then it's blisters or ulcers or cancer is the problem. Have I had any treatment? No. List the attached medication? None. Burning sensation at the right hip. Running nose when eating. Cracked lips. Slight pain in foot blister. Wear glasses. Walk with a cane sometime. Hernia enhanced by electromagnetism. No, I'm not pregnant. Do you have insurance? No. Are you a veteran? No. Sign, Glen Kealey, April 11th. Then there's a disclosure sheet that I was given by the doctor. We are legally required to inform you that the details of your health information shall be kept secure and confidential. However, on occasion, it may be necessary for us to disclose personal information to other healthcare providers for diagnosis, assessment, or treatment of your health issue. We will notify you if such actions are required and ask you to sign a release of information form prior to sharing any information with other parties. So I put C attached, signed Glen Kealey, disclosed to OPP, Ontario Provincial Police, immediately. Then there's the letter. Melanie Atkinson, Dear Pod. Pod is the nickname for chiropodist. I am hereby informing you that I will not attend our appointment schedule for Monday, April 16th, 3:30 p.m., 2018, but will be open-minded to another date if... ... End of page 1. Page 2. A conspiracy consisting of genetically modified sleeper cells operating under deep cover within the bureaucracies employed by, but not working for, Canadians, including Ontarians, is currently fully operational at the following: Bell Canada, Ontario Hydro, Services Canada Revenue, Canadian Border Services Agency. This conspiracy is charged with bringing about a genocide of both Canadians and Americans residing on both sides of the border, 300 miles on both sides. Also, unbeknown to most police, they, in fact, following our 30-year investigation, are the conspiracy's patsies, who, as first responders, must always be eliminated. See OPP headquarters in Orillia, Ontario, code name 777. Ms. Atkinson, I am the 76-year-old founder and chairman of the Canadian Institute for Political Integrity since 1987 and incorporated in 1992-93. I suggest, Melanie, that your time spent looking at my sores resulting from electromagnetic field popping up on our farm could best be used instead to make a phone call to the OPP. See copy of card for details, and I've attached a copy of the OPP card along with hers on the last page, and report this communication. Melanie, please be aware that I love Canada and Canadians dearly, especially at the times prior to 1972, when police cared more about protecting our citizens rather than what they do now, caring more for promotions, raises, and pension-filled careers. Before I leave this life, my wish is that I help the OPP regain the respect of Canadians like when once they used to earn it. Page 5. The OPP have aided and abetted Bell and Hydro by tampering with evidence at our Giacomo Meadow on our farm in Oxford Mills. To keep their secret from becoming known in a court of law, they kidnapped my wife, Jennifer, and handed her over to CBSA, who deported her back to California when a court hearing prohibited such a move. That way, no one would be told of Tom Byberg, our tenant's murder, by electromagnetism generated to the level of explosions under the basement floor. Page 6. Creation is not a person, it's a process. Genocide is not creation's doing. It is done by humans. When will the OPP regain respect? By investigating what we know and what was done to us. An ulcer is a port of entry for other problems. See cancer. Millions will die. I got a call back from them saying they were returning my money and they didn't want to have any part to play in this. I said to them that you already have a part to play. By doing what you're doing, you will be certainly called as witnesses in a court of law that cannot be controlled by bureaucrats. And she went and talked to somebody, the girl on the phone went and talked to somebody, which I believe is the doctor. And she came back and she said, we can't book you an appointment until June, July time frame, because everything up until then is booked. Not true, but that's what she said, so that, whatever happens to my foot would have progressed beyond repair by June or July. So that's what I brought them. I read it to Jennifer this morning, and she said, if you can send me a copy, I will use it here. So I'm asking the cell what they want me to do with this, and they said, make copies, drop one off at the OPP, one at every media you come across in your neighborhood, and every time you see a policeman where you can hand him something, give him a copy, so that the secret is not kept by management.
You want to make a copy? I'll send me one. I could put it on the internet.
Yeah, I will, but I got to do the local ones first.
Well, Jenny could send it to me if you send it to her.
Yeah. She's probably in a better position because she can put it on her computer. I don't have a computer, and dealing with the mail is about like dealing with the devil. because they are part and parcel of the problem.
By the way, Dana's on right now.
Hi, Dana.
Hey, Glenn. Hey.
Did you hear the letter?
I've been on, I guess, 10 minutes, so I've heard, I don't know what was...
I think he heard page 2.
Page 2?
Yeah.
Okay. So page 1 was addressed to Melanie Atkinson and her address and stuff. I am hereby informing you that I will not attend our appointment scheduled for Monday, April 16th, 3:30 p.m., 2018, but will be open-minded to another date if. And then on page 2, it starts with a conspiracy consisting of genetically modified sleeper cells operating under deep cover within the bureaucracies employed by but not working for Canadians, including Ontarians, is currently fully operational at the following: Bell Canada, Ontario Hydro Services Canada Revenue, Canadian Border Services Agency. This conspiracy is charged with bringing about a genocide of both Canadians and Americans residing on both sides of the border, 300 miles on both sides from the border. Also unbeknown to most police. Did you hear that?
Yes, I heard that part. Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to be distributing copies to as many policemen as we can, because we can't trust management at police or the girls at the front counter are probably even worse.
That Dr. Emily?
Yeah.
I get the feeling that in their thinking it's either two things. Like, they got your letter and looked at it and said, whoa, what's going on here? What are we involved in? Or they just think you're crazy.
Yeah.
Is it a doctor's office or like one of those urgent cares or emergency room? Like, where did you go?
It's a place called Body and Soul. Basically, supposedly treats body illnesses, but specializing in feet care. So over the last few months, I've developed a ulcer on the side of my foot. This is following the hernia and all the other problems you have living under these conditions here that I've had since we moved here. I've limped over some period of time at the beginning where I couldn't jump over the fence properly to get to feed the animals when the snow blocks the gates and stuff like that. All these things. So this ulcer on the side of my foot, just behind the small toe, is something that appears to those people I talk to be potentially cancer. Well, and I don't want anybody to touch it until the police have started their investigation on the electromagnetic effect on human beings. And not only did they not start the investigation, they provided guards for Hydro when Hydro came and put a shield to hide the readings on my meter so that nobody could say, how come they sent Kealey a bill for $17,000 and now $19,000 when all he used up doesn't even make up $1,000? That's the meter on the pole in the back meadow.
Right.
It has 10 plugs on it. It was put up originally to be there to help build the barn and we never got enough funding to build the barn, so it basically was used when they shut off the power to the house to bring power to the truck so that I could charge things from the truck. Because the truck doesn't work, but if it had a plug in it, I could charge things. So, and it's near the entry gate to the farm. So they started charging me, I think it was $120. Then they boosted the price to $240. Then they boosted the price to $4 something. Then they transferred the debt they said I owed on the house to that phone, which would make it, $20,000. But of course, the meter doesn't jive with what they're saying. And since I paid for that, it wasn't here when I arrived, I used my pension money, back pay, to put in 2 telephone hydro poles to the back, and the wiring and all that I paid for. Cost me $6,000. When the sale saw that post at the back, they said, this is going to be helpful one day. It's going to be where the court will sit. But in the meantime, use it for what you can get to have minimum access to power. And when they saw I was doing that, they came and put a shield in front of the face of the meter so you can't see the numbers, and they shut off the power and sent me a bill for $19,000. So if there was a police investigation, the first thing they have to do is look at the hydro poles and how they're grounded and how they're covered or protected. And then they have to look at the damage that was done to the house. Now, of course, Tom was not a prime healthy candidate, but he was much happier since he had moved here than he had been in BC. And he was doing the cooking, as you know, and that type of stuff. He called me, it was in 2014. I was still living in the RV for most of the time. And he said there's explosions going on under the house. And I said, Megan, when she first brought her RV here and was going to spend the summer, decided to leave because she said to me, couldn't sleep at night. Sounds like there's construction going on underground. Under my RV, I can hear it. So I thought she's making an excuse not to stay here. But when Tom said he could hear noises underneath, I moved into the basement to hear myself. And of course, I could hear. And as I stayed there, more and more pain in my scrotum and chest and body as a whole began to occur. So I said, I got to find out what the hell's making this noise under the house. So I started digging a hole. If you remember, there were stairwells on the south side, outside, beside where we'd park cars or trucks, and you'd go down in the basement from there. So just beyond the top platform, I started digging outside. And as I dug, I came across the wire that came from Hydro and Bell, which are connected together, one with a big wire, the other one with a fine wire, and came down to this lightning rod type of rod. So I started digging there and going down, finding as I went down that there was some ridiculous construction that had gone on underneath there, because the pipe that is supposed to gather up water that might affect the foundation, which is about a 6 to 8 inch round pipe with holes in it, it's supposed to be installed in a way to catch the water and lead it out of the foundation area to another place further away downstream so that the water flows away. But here, it had been done in the opposite way. It was capturing water from the surface and bringing it down under the house. And I took that pipe out to at least stop the damage. It wouldn't be helpful to natural flow of water, but it would at least stop the surplus water being brought down there. And then I started to read on Michael Faraday's concept in the 1800s of electromagnetism and the effect it can have on people. And I had a flashlight that said this flashlight is operated without a battery on electric magnetism, and do not, I forget what the wording is, danger, do not keep it in your pocket or something to that effect. So I said, if a little flashlight like this can affect a human being, what the hell can electromagnetism affect when you're dealing with the ground and you're dealing with big poles with grounding wires that have not been covered, and you have this rod, this grounding put in by whoever put in the electricity, and here I am 3 feet underground, and I can't push this rod in any manner, shape, or form to pull it out. And I had taken the truck and tied the pole onto the truck, and the truck couldn't pull it out. The truck's wheels just kept spinning. So I went to the neighbor on the south side there who used to live here. And I asked the guy, I said, do you know anything about the grounding rod beside the house that you used to go and see your girlfriend in? He said, yeah. I said, well, I've dug down 3 feet and I can't budge it. How long is that rod? He said, 22 feet. I said, 22 feet? That's impossible. Somebody has to pound that rod into the ground, and there ain't nobody equipped to pound a 22-foot rod without some real big, heavy equipment that you find only on oil wells. So I kept digging, and I got down to just around 4 feet, and it was getting dark outside, and I tried to push, and I couldn't move it. So I went to bed. Next morning, around 10 o'clock, I go back down in the hole, and I was going to dig some more, and I tripped a little bit in going down, and when I was toppling over, I touched the rod with the end of my fingers, and it budged. So I got up, and I pulled, and there was no problem at all. It had another foot in the ground or so. And, hey, I said, there's only one thing that could do that. This rod had been magnetized, and somebody shut it off overnight. Something happened to shut down the magnetism. Now, what does that incur, and what does it all mean? And I was looking at, 4 feet down, where the water was coming from the surface to under the foundation, and there is a pattern of rocks laid out that could not have been done unless done on purpose. And that's when I got to dig under the foundation and made my way in about 10 feet, 15 feet maybe. I'm not quite sure because can't measure while I'm down there, but it's certainly longer than me by a number of feet because I was totally under the house. And I came across a tag that said Ontario Hydro. So I started widening, digging around there. Then stuff was falling from the foundation, my roof, the basement floor on the other side. And I noticed if I turned around and looked up instead of down, that there was a whole patch, probably about 3 or 4 feet, that was not there in the cement foundation. And either it had never been there, or it had been eaten away by something, so that where the foundation should normally be about 8 inches in thickness, that area had lost about 6 inches. That would mean that from what was left to the floor of the basement could not be more than 2 inches. So I went and got a drill, and I said, I've gone this far, I got to check this out. But I spent at least an hour unable to budge anything in that top 2 inches with any drill, steel drill, whatever drills I have, or there was one for almost anything. But it just wouldn't act on anything against the gravel that I could see as the floor of the basement. But, of course, naturally, only a couple of inches, I should say, thick. So what I did was try to calculate the distance between where that was by the length of my shovel, and then go upstairs, starting at the wall, put it down, and it would tell me that it was right in the middle of the room where we go, not the back room where the furnace is, and that just that front part. It was right in the middle of that, next to the bed where you slept, Danny, and where I had been sleeping for months now. So is it any wonder that a gravel floor under the house for 40-some years, receiving water as the mode of transmission? Water is the mode of transmission of electromagnetism through gravel, through rocks. And I kept looking around as I dug, of course, and setting out the rocks that I picked up. And you can see that when you have a rock that contains other things that you can see, like red and pink and white and crystals and stuff like that, that the outer side of the rock will not be affected in the same way as the inside of the rock. And if you turn on electromagnetism, it creates a change in heat that I discovered later with thermometers out in front. As soon as the sun comes out, some of the thermometers that are linked to the basement rocks that I took out go all the way around the thermometer and past the bottom up on the other side. You know, I go outside, I know it's 0 degrees outside, and if it's sunny, I'll look at one thermometer, it'll say 0 degrees. I'll look at another thermometer, it'll say 0 degrees. I look at another thermometer, it says 19 degrees. I look at another thermometer close to the stuff that came from the stairwell, 50 degrees. Then I look at the fifth one, 0 degrees. When I say 0, within 1 or 2 degrees. 1 or 2 or 3 degrees, depending on the shade that you have. So the right temperature on half the thermometers, the wrong temperature on the other half. So I pick up 3 thermometers that are reading right, and I switch them with 3 thermometers that are not reading right. And guess what? The ones that are not reading right now start to read right, and the ones that read right now start to read wrong. So I'm sure that it couldn't have affected somebody who slept there for a couple of days to the extent that it does with people who live there. And looking at the history of the house, the father died, the girl bore a mentally handicapped son, and then the mother finally died in the house. And here I am developing all of these wounds on my body. Now, what is going on in 908 County Road 18 that the police or the CBSA or Bell Canada and certainly Hydro know and are not telling people? Well, what is going on is that people are affected by electromagnetism. Our body is made up of 2 different circuits, one for fight, flight, and the other one for normal activity. And electricity passes through the system and is heading for glands to which it gives instructions that are based upon what a normal situation should be. However, when that starts to be affected by electromagnetism, it causes the glands to clump. And when they clump, they can't do the original job they were supposed to do. So what do you do when you have clumps in your glands? You end up with your biggest gland, your brain, developing things like strokes, followed way down the line with the worst part, Alzheimer's. In your heart, you develop clots in the blood sticking to the sides, and you get heart attacks, angina. But if anybody, and I look at my neighbors, and John Worm, I don't know, Jared, did you go to his place?
John Worm, the one to the right or the left facing your house from the street? Which?
No, down Jig Street, and he's a textile worker. He repairs Chesterfields.
I haven't been to any of your neighbors' houses.
Okay. Because I had suggested at that time that he might be interested in you to work in the textile if you were able to move to Canada and help him with his Chesterfields and chairs that he recovers. He's an upholsterer at work, and he's on the political side, he's an upholsterer of history. He wants to cover up what the Nazis did. Okay, so he works on a cement floor. He's had strokes. He can hardly walk anymore. And he lives about not quite a kilometer, I guess, from here. The guy, as I said, who was born here and moved next door is mentally handicapped. They lived in the basement. The guy across the street, 911, German Gorel, have a mentally handicapped boy as well. It all seems to affect men more than women. Now you have to think back at the beginning of time, because as the Big 8-0 chart describes, you have what we would call modern time. And it starts at 4000 BC and ends at 0, and then reverses the path going backwards. Well, the first baby ever born, I've told you this before, of the human species, could only come across the place they were in to being a human being, could only make that journey by accident. It is all based on the elements of minerals moving through the earth. And when they accidentally, one in a million, one in a billion, come together with the right balance of elements, it creates life. So you can imagine that the first child that survived was not the first, because there's millions and billions of years from the creation of the planet to first life of human beings. So maybe in what is now South America or Africa or North Pole or whatever, kaboom, by a stream or a pool of water, polluted water probably, a child would turn from a fetus into a baby in the water and work its way out to the shore, but would die. No food, no ability to get food when you're that newborn, and die. Until one day, a lioness, female lion, or a jaguar, or any of the big cats that you know of, comes walking by. And it is in the instincts of cats, if they see a baby cat someplace or a baby of anything, cats eat cats, they'll eat it. That applies probably to about 30% of cats. There's another 70% of cats divided into two categories. One category sees a baby and walks away. The other cat sees a baby and steals it from its own mother. But here, in this case, there is no mother. So the cat picks up in its mouth in a way that they do not to hurt and takes it into the cave where it lives. And there in that cave is the cat's background. And if you look at TV today, on the Golf Channel or some other NBC probably, you will see there's a tournament on. It's called the RBC tournament. Take a look at the logo of RBC if you ever get to see it. It's Royal Bank of Canada. And I know, Jared, you've been in the Royal Bank of Canada.
Yeah.
If you look at their logo, there's a cat, big cat, licking its chops, holding planet Earth. And under the Earth are the letters RBC, rats, bats, and cats. Number two is number one. Number one is number two. Why do they call a second on a clock a second, not a first? It's because there's something that came before the second that's in hiding. And what could that be in the English language except an ant? An ant has gone into hiding underground. An ant goes around above ground picking up everything that's useful to it and takes it down to its place underground. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So at the front, missing in front of RBC, is ant, rats, bats, cats. Big cats outside. What does the charitable organization that models itself on being the bosses of industry and politics call themselves? The Lions Club. Bankers belong to the Lions Club. Like ants, they bring the money in and it disappears. And if you want it, you can't get it. But if somebody else makes a deposit, they will lend you that other person's money, on which they charge one for keeping his money and investing it, and they charge the other one for keeping its money and letting you come back and take it and spend it when you need it. Where does the money go? It goes to Wall Street. What is Wall Street except somebody very rich steals from somebody middle class? Can't steal from the poor, they got nothing. So they steal from the middle class. How do they steal? They steal by controlling the stock market. Since their investments in the stock market are so fantastically large, whatever they do with their money will affect the stock market. You're dealing with people with trillions of dollars betting against people who are thousands of dollars at most, in the vast majority. And it's interesting to know that the average person that makes an investment in the stock market and wins, which is not by far the most of them, make 5% in a year. While corporate people, corporations that invest in the stock market, make 10%. And politicians like senators make 15%. In other words, the people with the money make the rules for the earth and get paid for it through the stock market rather than through bribes. Now that I've given you background on what happens, you have to look at that big 8-0 with a different mindset. You have to say that chart of genetically engineered human beings that starts in 4000 BC and returns after hitting 0, that chart is the least important. What's most important is what came before, and in 4000 BC was the end of the Ice Age from 8,000 to 4,000. What came before the Ice Age, hundreds of thousands of years compared to 2,000 years that we, the religious dummies, think about. If we're stupid enough to be religious all our lives, we deserve it. And that top part is the most important part to explain what's happening now, and they don't teach anything about it in school because they don't know. But yet, it becomes the least important part once this part, the part we live in, ends and the future begins in space travel. So in other words, the people who lived before us, before the Ice Age, knew as much as we know today, but could not prove that what they believed to be true was right because they had no large population to run laboratories in to prove out what they believed to be the truth. So they created our time after the Ice Age as a laboratory. As a matter of fact, in England, they called the two political parties Labour and Tory. And they sent a bunch of people out, British Empire loyalists, to set up North America. And then you bad guys stepped on their foot and said, fuck you. You're not making us a division of you. We're going to be independent. And in 1776 to 1783, change came about in the relationship between England and the U.S. And when that happened, a whole bunch of British Empire loyalists who lived in the U.S. moved to Canada. So many of them moved that they were able to take over control of Canada away from the French. And then their controllers back in England said, a bunch of you get back in on the other side. We need sleeper cells all over the U.S. And the day has come now when the U.S. has served its purpose. It's developed what is required for space travel. and proven that what the people who became ants and went underground and hid while this activity was going on in the Moho discontinuity, accessing it through the shields of the world, because those are the original continents that existed, not the plates that we have today. And down there, they built their society as spies. And they made Antarctica their above-ground headquarters for coming in and out with their spaceships, such as flying saucers coming out of mountains. Perfect design for coming out of a hole. And they steal what the laboratories learn and match it up with what they knew. And when it does, they give them a prize, Pulitzer Prize, an Academy Award, a Stanley Cup, a Super Bowl. A Super Bowl of fish soup. When the Lou at the Sioux happens, what will happen to the people downstream? They will become part of a soup of fish and humans. The Bible says that one guy gave away his entire control over the world in return for fish soup. They don't need control except to get rid of us. So they created religion and sent religion as the first government of the people, which evolved later into politics. And that religion was created in North Africa, Western North Africa, in an area around Morocco called Voodoo. And when the religious people were asked, how are you going to control? They said, we have power to control, and we control from a distance. The concept of the doll with the pin stuck in it. When Moses said to the king of Egypt, let my people go, and the king said no, Moses' brother threw his rod upon the floor, and it started to bounce and jump all over the place. Somebody was playing with magnetism under the floor. The covenant, the Ark of the Covenant. Look at the pictures. A box, two things sticking out, and an electric jump from one to the other side. Negative to positive, positive to negative. Ark of the Covenant. Covenant is a contract. That's what we're living in, and that's what we're dying from. I had always been told that the average lifespan for human beings should not be below 120 years. But they brought it down to 40. And then they slowly built it up so they could claim credit for having discovered cures. You don't need cures if you don't cause the damage. Electromagnetism is not a bad thing. It's required if it's in balance with the planet. But when it surges and is out of balance, it takes everything close by along with it. Ontario Hydro doesn't want to come here, and the police don't want to investigate Ontario Hydro and Bell for creating surges in our electromagnetism on this farm because electromagnetism is the most important method by which they control. What do they want to do next? In which hundreds of billions of dollars is currently being invested in something called G5 to be made public in 2020, where you will know everything instantly because your glasses will tell you everything instantly as you walk down the street. If a person walks by you, you'll see his name. Hi, George. That's why they have to put in wireless antennas all over the place, and they're spending billions of dollars. But most important to them, and always has been from the beginning, is transportation. The thing they don't like about transportation is they don't control it. Once it's built by them, it has to be handed over to human beings to control it. But once they have magnetic cabling put underneath all the highways, driverless cars can proceed down the highway, never having to stop to recharge. They just get a bill for what their car picked up along the way. Trillions and trillions of dollars from driverless vehicles. They're there now. So they don't need us anymore. And over the next 40 years, to 2058, with a 4-year give or take, 2058 becomes 2062, or 2054, give or take. 40 years, they need the place cleaned up. They want nobody in control. They don't want politicians in control. They don't want bureaucrats in control. They want the current batch of sleeper cells in control. And the current batch of sleeper cells only lasts a few hundred years. And they're replaced with what they've worked out to be the next version. Genetically engineered human beings are genetically engineered from good people who've had the good parts removed and replaced with nasty. And then they get $100,000 a year instead of $40,000 a year working as policemen or military security. But like every other person on Earth, they are only useful for a duration of time. And when it comes time to change the batch, you bring in refugees that you've made in a place where nobody could see. Syria is one of those places. And then you create war, pestilence, famine, and disease to keep a whole bunch of people busy, while you turn to a cataclysmic event to depopulate a region. Blue at the Sioux. When the water comes, it'll come into Canada first, and then will expand into the U.S. When it
number two is number one.
Yeah. When it expands in the U.S., it takes out millions of people. In Canada, most of the time, it'd be hundreds of thousands of people. But the first place it's heading for is Orillia, Ontario. And for some unknown reason to people, in 1949, the Premier of Ontario moved OPP headquarters out of Toronto to Orillia. Now, why would you want to put the equivalent of a national police force in a small country town in direct line with the Lou at the Sioux? Unless you had a plan. And why would you give them code number 777 and tell them they're lucky? They're number one. The water will flow 40, 60 feet high right over OPP headquarters. First responders will have nobody to contact. Why would anybody want to put the military on a border? If not that some borders are more dangerous than others. National Guard is going to the border on the Mexican side of the U.S. But the military is on the border on the Canadian side, Fort Drum. It is the Mountain Division located at Fort Drum. Where are the mountains at Fort Drum? The closest thing you could call to a mountain is Montreal, Mount Royal. Flooded to a point where I used to work. 1081 Beaver Hall Hill. That comes above Old Montreal, which is below the hill, New Montreal, which is above the hill, and Rich Montreal, which is on the top of Mount Royal. What's on top of Mount Royal? Religion. What's down below? On one side, Outremont, the rich French. What's the name of the other place? The rich English are there. And then the rich Jewish community are there. McGill University. What is a gill? It's oxygen receptors on a fish. Guess what? I have a telephone. My telephone tells me where I am at the top by me pressing Oxford Mills. However, I discovered last Christmas that somebody went home for Christmas and forgot to change their system because what appeared on my telephone was McGill University, 385 Sherbrooke Street West, the base of Mount Royal. Bell Canada's offices were across the street. Their national headquarters for Bell Canada was across the street from me on Beaver Hall Hill. If water comes to the edge of Sherbrooke Street in Montreal, Bell Canada is underwater on Beaver Hall Hill. Where does a beaver live? Underwater. So what did Bell Canada decide to do? They decided to move to Hull, Quebec. Not tell anybody that's what they were doing, just make it look like a branch operation Hull, Quebec, right across from Parliament Hill. Right next to the museum you used to go to. And what property did they steal in order to build that building but mine? Wow. And how did they get it? Through the Prime Minister's office. They bribed the Prime Minister, Brian Mulroney. Who are the people that the court said in 1991 when I went to court in Ottawa? Who are the people? The Prime Minister's Chief of Staff, senators, cabinet ministers in Brian Mulroney's government. The bastards at Bell Canada built their building because of the land I acquired for them, without knowing they were going to steal it from me, because there was a school on the site. The school would not move because they said politicians will make our kids take the bus and go someplace else to school. And I said, no. You go around your area, pick out a place, we'll build you a school. You move into the school for 400 kids, give me the keys to the old school. That's what they did. And as soon as they moved, we knocked down the school. And then an attempt at having me fired was started by my two partners that I gave their 1/3 interest to, an architect and a financier. And the court said, no, Glen Kealey is the president. You have a unanimous shareholders agreement, and just because you now have 66% and he has 33%, you can't override his decision because you need unanimous consent. And that was the end of our project, because I said I would never work with these people on anything. And I said, pay the bills, I'm going. And I took no money for myself, and I made sure that all the bills were paid, and my wife got $5,000 so that she could move. And I got divorced. And I said right at the beginning, I used to say that Canada was a democratic country ruled by laws. I lied, not on purpose, because that's what I was taught. What it is a crooked country ruled by crooks. And I'm going to go find out the bottom of this story. And I took from 1987 until 2006, when the cell came up to me and said, we've come here to help you. And I said, why would you help me? And they said, you earned it. You earned it by showing respect for other people. You earned it by not ever giving up. And it's not over yet, and you're going to need help. And then that's when Jennifer called me back. We had spoken from 2003 to 2005, I think it was. And the last thing she had said to me is, what do you think about life after death? And I said, having no proof that it exists, no proof that it doesn't exist, I have no firm opinion. However, I'm leaning on the side of there is no life after death. And Jennifer said at that time she hung up the phone and decided that her life would consist on her work and her home, and that would be it. Now, when she called back in 2006, she said, are you still of the same opinion? I said, no. This is the evidence that I have. I was approached in the bush by people who call themselves the Cell. They said they are 26 in numbers, and come to Toronto, you'll see them all in one place. Next morning, I went to Toronto. I went and found in the Don Mills area of Toronto the place that I had been told to go. There was, if I remember correctly, 2 doors and no way for me to get in. But while I was standing at the door, somebody came in or out, and I grabbed the door and walked in, up the stairs, and I went to a boardroom where there were 26 men, and they said there are no women in the group. I said, that's not a very balanced approach. But in the meantime, there's nothing I can do about it, except I recognize in the group of people 4 people that I knew, 2 uncles and 2 former workers with me, all of which I knew were dead. They said they were 26, and the 26 all had some connection to me in this life or another past life, and that each one of them could call upon experts from people who had lived and died under a process called quantum disestablishment. And those experts could come from people that I had known in the past to do any specific task. They totaled 144. People came in and out of that group, and they, as the cell, could ask that certain individuals be brought in. And at that time, I asked for, I'm trying to think of his name, there's a guy linked to Mulrooney. They called him Mulrooney's Bulldog, because I figured he knew more about Mulrooney than anybody else. I'll think of his name. I can't remember it right now. In any event, recently I've asked for George Petrovic. George, in his foreign language name, was Dordy, D-O-R-D, and he's a painter of the future. And I asked as well for Michael Faraday. And those people are assisting the cell, and over the last month or 2 or 3, they have been concentrating on McGill University. McGill University used to operate the Montreal Neurological Institute under a guy called Wilder Penfield. Is it so strange that Jennifer had at one time changed her name to Wilder? Arizona Wilder, I think it was. And then said, I don't know why I did that, but I returned back to my original name, which is linked to Angel. Nagel is just Angel with the letters changed around. The same as Glen, except for the A, because I don't have the underground help at the beginning. It's not a Glen, it's just Glen, which is 4 of the 5 letters of Angel. And guess what? Montreal Neurological Institute had been closed, and a new hospital built by McGill University and the government's for $1 billion. And what did they call it? Glen. come off it. Montreal Neurological Institute says something. What does Glen say? It's an Anglophone name in a Francophone community, mostly, although it's in the Anglophone side of things at McGill University. Well, what's a glen but a meadow? And where did they hide the meter reading? But on our farm, on the meadow, on Glen. Tell the world not to worry. Creation is on our side. Dying is not the end of anything. Living is not the beginning of anything. What we do, and it's now known that the top scientist in the world died recently.
Oh, Dawkins.
Eh?
Richard Dawkins? I'm not Dawkins. The guy who was handicapped. The quadriplegic. Yeah.
And guess what his last papers are on?
Quantum something?
There is more than one universe. There is more than one universe. The fella told me, and I think I told you, 26 universes with a 27th in the middle. I passed on my authority to pardon people after they died if they hadn't done anything to be helpful. And I said that belongs to Jennifer. And Jennifer was made the first woman ever to be part of the cell, the 27th member. We're busy.
Yeah.
Nobody knows the story. You've been told again in a little more detail today. Would, in any circumstances other than these, be the talk of the town. Yet, all over the world, we are considered by the media to be non-persons. Don't bring up their names.
When I last spoke to Jennifer, she mentioned something about an update. I guess the cell's doing an investigation into they're working out, I think, either this year.
Something this year, next year, and the year after.
Yeah, they work scenarios.
4 years in a row, right? Starting with Super Bowl, what is it, 52?
The 52nd Super Bowl? I'm not sure what number Super Bowl.
Yeah, was that the number, 52 or 51 this year? Remember one
two,
thing.
I think?
Two, I think it's two. The number 52.
52, yeah.
You got to remember is that 50 in Latin is the letter L. There is no L. So really they're talking about number 2. Why is there no L? Well, Christmas tells you Noel, Noel, Noel. So if you're at number 2, then number 3 would be 2019. Number 4 would be 2020. And a guy in New York there, I think someplace, put a tattoo on his arm that I think it was for Boston would win the Super Bowl. And in order Well, it may have been 51. I don't know. I don't follow that enough. He said, if I'm wrong, and I've got L, and in Latin you would have to have 51, 52, 53, 54, would all be number ones. He said I could just add an L and make it next year. Or add a 1 and make it next year. So I suspect that's a code. So if it was 1, Super Bowl 51, that would mean 18, 19. No, 18 would be 1, 19, 20, and 21. If it's 2, it ends at 20. But remember, you can never stop at 0, and number 1 is number 2. So because of the fact that 2022, you remove the 0 and make it number 1, you're left with 222. Jennifer's email address is jendoe222 @gmail.com. And she didn't decide it for herself because she got to California and their daughter said, well, I'll set you up, and gave her that number. So it's her daughter that gave her the number. Gave her the code. So I have no doubt that information is transferred from mother to child through breastfeeding, but not through the food for maintenance in this world. The background of the nipple is the mammary, and while a child is feeding, food for today, memories of the past flowing through the mother's mammaries go into the child. And if I'm correct, Jennifer and I were first made in 42,000 BC and have lived different numbers of lives, learning different numbers of lessons along the way. And don't forget art, the ability to communicate without words, is a rat. Rats, bats, cats, RBC. You're playing golf this afternoon, but I got to go feed some animals. So I hope you remember all of that and pass it on.
Yeah, will do. Oh, by the way, I've been speaking to people from Scotland, 2 guys from Scotland.
Yeah.
And both of them are named Andy, coincidentally.
Yeah.
They're talking about they wanted to visit there up there this summer, but they're thinking about maybe getting a trailer or something, or maybe staying in a motel in the town, and I don't know, would come down to your place and I guess help around with what you might need.
Summer months, spring to summer-ish, over the next few months.
Yeah.
For like a couple of weeks, maybe, they were saying.
And don't forget their name, Andy, is DNA.
Eh? Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, no problem.
They want to try to contact you. They're not sure if you'll answer, but they said they might be sending you like a physical letter so you can, meet them through the letter, or they're going to try to call if that's okay.
Okay. But if they call and I can't recognize the phone number, we won't answer.
Yeah, you definitely won't recognize the number.
Well,
Yeah, so
I'll find out.
You guys maybe can get it from them and pass it on to me. Anyways, I gotta go now.
Okay, all right.
All right, Glenn.
All right.
Bye.
All right.